You've just made configuration changes to your router. You type in write memory or copy running config startup config, and you've saved those changes from the running config to your startup config. Now your router goes up in smoke. What configuration are you going to use to restore your router? Well, hopefully, you have a backup configuration. Oh, wait. You failed to back up your configuration to an external server? Oh, you forgot. All right, that's understandable. We're human, we forget. Even though we had a checklist that states that if you copy running config, the startup config, or you make changes, you're going to have to perform a backup of your configuration. So we find our most recent backup, and it was, from 7 months ago. A lot of changes have happened in the last 7 months in our organization. Things are not looking good for us right now. We want to make our lives as easy as possible when it comes to backing up our router configurations. To manually back up router configurations is a lot of work. To remember that after you've made changes, not only to save it locally, but then to make a copy of that and put it somewhere else, like copy running config TFTP or copy running config FTP, that's a lot of work. And with all these additional manual processes introduced, can generate issues, forgetfulness, even if there are checklists. And we do want to take those configuration files and move them to an external server, because if the device goes up in smoke, we need to access those configuration files from somewhere else. And we want to grab those configuration files and restore our router, our device, as quickly as possible. However, we want to take away the possibility of a user forgetting in our organization, or you yourself forgetting to perform that backup to that remote location. So we can do some automated backups in our environment using the archive feature. Now, the archive feature allows us to specify where we are going to be sending those archives, those backups. And in this case, it's an FTP server. So we specified FTP, the username, the password, the IP address of the FTP server, as well as this $H. This is referred to the host name. It's the naming convention for the file. So we're saying just use the host name of the router every time you generate an archive of the configuration. Once you've done this, just these two commands, archive in global configuration mode and the path in archive configuration mode, you can use the archive config command from privilege exec mode, and that will generate an archive for you. So you made some changes to the router. You type in copy running config startup config. That'll save from RAM to NVRAM. And then you type in archive config. And then you'll be able to back up to your FTP server. But that's still manual. I want automatic. I don't want to have to type in a second command. And that's where this command down here, write memory, comes into play. With write memory, you are telling the router if the command copy running config startup config or any variation of that command, or write memory or any variation of that command are executed on the router, automatically create an archive config at the same time and store it wherever the path is. So you just need one command, and it happens automatically for you in the background. And as you can see, copy running config startup config was generated. Everything was okay. And it says writing R1-1. So we triggered the archive to happen just by typing in copy running config startup config. And if we want to verify the archives that we have, you type in show archive on the router. And it shows you all the archives that have been created R1-1, and then the next one was R1-2, the next one was R1-3, the next one was R1-4, and this is the most recent. It even tells you that. It says most recent. So at any point in time, if we need to restore an archived configuration, we can do so by calling upon the name of the archive from the particular FTP server and restoring it. However, we may also be inclined to make sure that these archives happen on a regular schedule as well, whether there are changes or not, just to make sure. Because what if somebody made a change to the running config but didn't type in copy run start? What if this has happened many, many times? Well, what we can do is we can specify a time period in the archive configuration. And based on this time period, which in this case is 1,440 minutes, an archive will automatically be created every 1,440 minutes without us typing in anything. So this gives us the added level of, well, we can use the term security if we want to make sure that there is an archive of our current running config within 1,440 minutes. So if any changes has happened in 1,440 minutes, we'd only lose those changes if nobody issued the copy running config startup config command, which through the write memory command would have generated the archive as well for us.